How much deposit is enough? When should you talk to a broker? And what are the actual rules around rent vesting or buying land with a 5% scheme? We're answering your money questions straight from our Facebook group. Welcome to Your First Home Buyer Guide, the podcast for first home buyers who want to become educated home buyers.
I'm Veronica and that was Megan. We are two of Australia's most experienced buyer's agents and probably old enough to be your mum, which is a good thing because between us, we've got almost 50 years experience to share with you, and together we're going to cut through the BS and make sure that you're well informed so you make better decisions.
Now, when you get to the end of this episode, make sure you check out the website, homebuyeracademy.com.au. Take a look at our course for first home buyers.
We've created an easy-to-follow course that builds on all of our professional experience to take you step by step through the whole home buying journey.
You'll know exactly what to do, when to do it, and be able to find your first home faster and easier with our guidance along the way.
It's the next best thing to having your very own buyer's agent.
Now, before we get into the interesting stuff, in this week's episode, there's the boring bit to do, and that's the disclaimer.
You, of course, know that nothing in this podcast is to be taken as personal advice. We always recommend getting the advice of an expert in their field who takes their time to personally understand your situation. Now, we've done our very best to ensure that the content is correct at the time of recording, but things change rapidly, so always check with the relevant government authority or your trusted advisors, or both, to get the most up-to-date information. If you're in our First Home Buyer Facebook group, you've probably seen a flood of questions about deposits, borrowing, and how to access government schemes. And we've picked some of the most common questions, or the questions with the common themes for this episode. We will break down the myths around the 20% deposit, explain how brokers get paid, clarify the capital gains tax rules that apply to first home buyers turned investors, and explore whether rent vesting is the right strategy for you. So if you're stuck between saving more or getting in sooner, this episode will give you the clarity to move forward. And this is about step 2 in our pay system. Do you want to explain that, Megan?
For sure. I think before I do that, I just want to make sure that everyone understands this is general advice. You need to get personal advice about your own situation in relation to every one of these questions, okay? We're just giving you some ideas and some guidelines. But this is part of step 2 in the pay system, and that's all about money. It's the part where we teach you what you need to do, how to become financially fit, the kinds of questions to ask a broker, how to set yourself up really well for your search from a money perspective.
And the pay system is preparation, action, commitment, execution, which is, and in those 4 areas are the 10 steps that we teach everybody who does the course in how to buy a property without getting everything all in the wrong order.
Yeah, get there, find that house, be that homeowner. So exciting.
And be confident while you're doing it. All right. So the first question is, how much of a deposit would you recommend having for a house? What would a lender require at a minimum?
As always, depends question, because it really does depend on a whole lot of things. Now, you might have heard a lot of people talk about needing a 20% deposit, but that's not always true. There are so many other options. With a 20% deposit, you actually avoid lender's mortgage insurance with most lenders. Now, that's great, but it's not always advisable to wait until you've saved that much. You know, like if prices are rapidly rising, can you outsave how rapidly the prices are changing?
Yeah, and look, some government schemes will allow you to get into the market for 5% or as low as 2% in certain circumstances and avoid LMI or lender's mortgage insurance. But you have to qualify for those schemes, and your broker will be your knight in shining armor, I guess, regarding that, because the broker will explain how you get access to these schemes. So that's why it's really important to engage with a good broker very early on. In fact, we talked about step 2 in our pay system, and it's all about money. But step 1 is getting your support crew lined up, and a broker is a really essential person for that. But if you don't qualify for one of those schemes, you can still buy for less than 20% deposit if you can manage the repayments. And a good broker, again, will advise on all of this.
And I think that's a really good point that you make, Veronica, because it doesn't matter whether you're putting in a 20% deposit or a 2% deposit, you still have to be able to afford the repayments. So it's not just about that first part of the process. It's actually about thinking about, do I have enough for a buffer if interest rates go up? And we make no comment about that. They're up, they're down. That's not part of this. You actually have to just plan for the possibility that that might be the case. So we have done some episodes on these sorts of topics previously. And the one that I'd suggest that you get a little bit more information from is episode 201. We go into a lot more detail in that episode.
Yep. So the next question is, have saved for a deposit? I now need to know where to start. Well, you are in the right place.
Hey, this is fantastic. Wow. That is such a huge milestone to feel like you've got to the point where you're ready to step onto the starting block. You know, the deposit is all the training that you've got to get to the starting block, and now you're kind of ready to step onto it or start the journey up the hill. Congratulations. Awesome. Saving for a deposit is a great achievement. And now it's time to take the next step. And this is about education. And that's why we built this course. That's why we downloaded our brains and shared everything that we know from our 50 odd years, combined of being in this industry.
And it's also interesting too, because some people do go to save their deposit without talking to a broker at all in that period of time. It's like they get enough money and now what? Other people will talk to a broker earlier before they've saved their deposit. And that we talk about that in the program, because obviously we would encourage you actually to get a good broker and talk to that broker earlier rather than just wait until you've saved all the money. Because there are often options, and there are often options that mean you can get into the market quicker as well. Or they might have really good tips for you in how to maximize your saving ability. And there's lots of value that a really good broker can bring to you. And also you can test them before you're going to immediately be a client, right? So when you're testing them before you're ready, if they're willing to help and guide you through that lead up process, then you can have much more confidence that they're going to be great to work with once you are ready. So this person is ready. Well done. Now, to ensure that you're well prepared and informed throughout the whole buying process, you know what? We recommend you go back to episode 1 of this podcast, right? Because in that episode, we provide a comprehensive overview of those 10 steps we're talking about. And if you're watching on video, you see the 10 steps behind us. And this is the 10 steps in the PACE system, which really form the foundation of the first home buyer course and the foundation of understanding exactly what to do in the right order to make sure that you have a much smoother, easier pathway to home ownership.
Absolutely. And knowledge is power. Having the right information in the right order is going to empower you to make really well-informed decisions. You will avoid costly mistakes. And ultimately, it's about owning that dream home. It'll be the perfectly imperfect version of a dream home, as we all have to have. Whether you got $500,000 or $5 million, there's going to be some imperfections there. But you can take this journey and absolutely get to the end of it and say, wow, I had a lot to do during that, but I feel like I made some really good decisions.
And I didn't make mistakes that are really avoidable. There is a lot of really easy to avoid mistakes, but they're very easy to make if you just don't know that they're there. So by enrolling in the course, you gain access to that step-by-step guidance in terms of teaching you what to do. But also we do a weekly campfire where people come along and the people are doing the course and they bring the properties that they're looking at and they bring their questions and we can guide them. And we also got a forum just for students and we can guide you to keep you on the right track. And so with those expert insights on navigating each stage of that home buying process and getting everything in the right order, as Megan said, the knowledge will empower you. You'll be making much more informed decisions. You'll be avoiding those costly mistakes and ultimately achieve your dream of home ownership. So that's why we built the course. But go back to episode 1 to get an overview of what's in it.
Now, next question, Veronica. Can you buy a property as a first home buyer, then rent somewhere else? I understand we cannot rent out the property until after 1 year, but correct me if I'm wrong.
You absolutely can buy a property and rent it out to somebody else as your first. It's called a first home, but typically it's not really a first home, isn't it? Because you're not living in it.
We sort of need to separate two things, don't we? Because if you're getting any grants, and we might just sort of backtrack a little bit here, if you're getting any grants that say that you must live in the property as a first home buyer, then you are governed by those rules.
Yes. But after that period of time, you have the opportunity to move out and use it as an investment and rent somewhere else or live somewhere else. And so it's called rentvesting. You are absolutely correct in that if you want to qualify for those government first home buyer grants and incentives, you have to make sure that you do live there for the appropriate period of time. And that may vary from state to state and from grant to grant. as well. It is quite complicated. A lot of people will
Also,
say
stamp duty concessions come into this as well,
Yep.
Veronica, because you do need to live in most states for a period of time if you do get a concession as a first home buyer.
Yeah, and to give you an idea about how this can be complicated, this questioner has said 12 months. Well, that's great, actually, because most of them are 12 months. But there are some that, you have to live in it for 6 months within the first 12 months. Or there are some that if it's currently tenanted and the lease hasn't expired, there's a bit of a grace period, but then the clock starts from the end of that lease, so it is a little bit complicated, and you do want to make sure that you fulfill your obligations if you're going to take the free money. I did read somewhere recently of somebody who was fined effectively and had to pay back their stamp duty that they'd saved because they didn't live in the property for long enough. So it is very important that you do understand the restrictions and your obligations before heading down this path.
Yeah, it's a principal place of residence. And that has a very clear definition. That is the place in which you reside. It is the place where the electricity is in your name. All of those things have to be proven if that comes into question, if any of those things come into question.
Now, we recently recorded a few podcast episodes dedicated to rentvesting. And the first one, we did 3 because it's not for everyone. And there are some complications, as with everything. But what we try to do is simplify it so you understand whether it might be right for you or not. So we recommend going back to episode 205. That's the first one in those 3 in that series. And I think that you might find that it will help you clarify whether it's the right thing for you or not. There's another one right back early in days at episode 56, which you could find very valuable.
Fabulous. Now, this is an interesting one. How many years can I own and or rent an investment property and not have to pay capital gains if I were to sell? Now, first and foremost, we are not giving financial advice.
And we're not tax experts.
We are not tax experts, right? So here's some general information. You can get this from the Australian Taxation Office website. But you then need to go and get personal advice from an advisor who is completely across your situation.
Yeah. And the advisor in this case, we'd recommend an accountant, a tax accountant, right? So generally, I really stress that generally, if you live in your home for at least 12 months and then you move out and you do not purchase another primary or principal place of residence, so it's called a PPOR, right? You have 6 years before you need to pay capital gains tax if you were to sell, right? And if you sold after that 6 years, or if you bought another PPOR within that 6-year period, you will be liable to pay capital gains tax on a portion of the capital gain when you sell.
Very complex.
Very complex. And this is why talking to an accountant is really important because, whether you get a market estimate of the property value, at which times you need to get that estimate in order to be able to provide evidence around, what the gains may be. And again, if you spend money improving the property, if you spend money renovating it, there are costs there that you need to account so that you can potentially reduce that tax. But these are all things that an accountant will guide you in.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, on the flip side, if you never live in the property and it's always been an investment, there's actually no capital gains tax free period, if you like, or grace period. If you have the property as an investment, then move into it and later move out again, then the 6-year rule may apply unless you have another principal place of residence. Complex, right? There's lots and lots of moving parts here. You don't buy a property trying to get this right. You understand first, and then if your situation changes, is you understand the implications of those changes.
And interestingly, as Megan's just said, that then if you sort of have the property as an investment, move in and then move out again, there will still be capital gains tax payable for the period of time up to when you moved in. Yeah. So again, it's all about record keeping and getting good accounting advice to make sure that you don't miss out on your opportunities to minimise your tax liability should this apply to you. But really the only way to avoid capital gains tax in this country when you sell a property is to have lived in it as your PPOR, remember that principal place of residence, for the entire time that you own it. So again, make sure you check with your accountant and also make sure your calculations are correct. Because, you might sort of pluck a figure out of the air and say, well, that's my market appraisal, but will that be okay with the ATO?
And you have to have
not.
the evidence.
So, you need to, so there are things that you need to do and get it all right. We will put a link to the ATO website actually in the show notes, because why not make it a bit easy for you to go and check out, get the info from the horse's mouth, so to speak.
Just remember that some things interact with others in unexpected ways. So again, really important to have a holistic conversation with a tax advisor about this, because you might get a very small piece of the puzzle and not understand all the other pieces that come into play when something changes. So, it is about getting personal advice, and personal advice is your entire situation, not just a little piece of the puzzle.
So true. All right, so this is a bit of an interesting question. How much land and in hectares? So this person is looking at more than a lifestyle
Big
block.
block of land.
Yeah. Can you purchase with the 5% deposit scheme?
It's an interesting one. Well, at the time of writing this, which is middle of July 2025, these schemes actually haven't been passed. So there's no hard and fast answers to the question. But as far as we could see when we go onto the Housing Australia website, there are some eligibility criteria, including income caps, price caps and property types. But importantly, you can't secure a place for the purchase of vacant land unless you also have a contract for the construction of a dwelling. Now, I'm not sure this is answering the question directly, but we couldn't see any reference at all to minimum or maximum land size.
No, but I think it's important to recognise that the government wants you to, if you're going to take advantage of the first home buyer deposit scheme, then they want you to be buying a home, not a big block of land. So therefore...
Which might be a home on a big block of land.
Yeah. Or, like Megan said, a big block of land with a contract to build a home on it. So there will be some restrictions around that. But yeah, we don't actually know the size. So it would come down to whether there were price caps and your eligibility in terms of your income caps as well.
Yeah.
So, watch that space, because when it becomes legislated, then you'll be able to hopefully have a lot more clarity around that. But I think it was such an interesting
sometimes
question.
There's gaps as well, Veronica. They might not have anticipated that someone might want to buy several hectares as a first home. So it might be one of those things, and this can happen. Maybe there's a new case and then there's an assessment of it and a new piece comes into the legislation to deal with that. Now, our final question for today is, when is the right time to meet a mortgage broker? And Veronica, you touched on this earlier. Is it while still saving, or do they charge you a fee to begin with, or is it a free consultation? Our member said, I'm new to this. I apologise if I sound dumb. No question is dumb, and that's why we're reading it right here, because probably lots of other people have got exactly the same question.
Actually, it's a really smart question.
I think it is too.
Because a lot of people assume that a broker won't talk to them until they've saved the money.
Yeah.
And they miss out on so much quality information if they deal with a really good broker. So we think it's a great idea to meet with a broker while you are still saving, because they can help you work out how much you'll need, what lenders will be looking for in terms of how to position yourself as a good borrower, and also set you up with a clear plan. And it can make a huge difference to your saving strategy and buying confidence.
Yeah, and most mortgage brokers will have that free initial conversation, and a lot of them don't charge you directly. They get paid by the lender once the loan has settled. But you do need to double check that, because there are some brokers who will charge a fee for the processing work that they do at certain points during the process. You just need to understand it. Doesn't mean they're good or bad if they charge you or don't charge you. It may mean that they are prepared to do a lot more work in the upfront phase if you pay them a fee. So just ask the question, be aware, and don't just choose a broker because they're free. Choose a broker who really understands the first home buying space, has got runs on the boards, a lot of experience, and is actually passionate about helping you.
In fact, some brokers are starting to charge for advice. And we're actually not against that at all, because the problem is when you get free advice, it's a sales pitch, right? It's a bit like this podcast. This podcast is free. It's really a sales pitch for our course, because that's where you get the real value, right? And brokers are a bit the same. So it's free to you in a way, but it's sort of built into the cost of mortgages, right? Ultimately, the way they get paid. But in terms of the advice piece, I think some are starting to say, you know what, we will put together a real plan for you. We'll really sit down and be really detailed. And it'll be personalised, not broad, and there is some value in that. So, yes, as Megan said, don't be scared off if they do charge a fee. Really just question, though, well, what am I going to get for that fee? What advice am I going to get? Now, if you want a good starting point, though, with brokers, we have put together a list of our recommended brokers that we know and trust on the website. So that's as simple as homebuyeracademy.com.au/brokers.
Perfect. Now, we hope that some of these questions have answered some of the questions that you might be thinking about, but just haven't really thought to articulate them or haven't joined the Facebook group to actually ask them. There's obviously a lot more of questions that we answer in the Facebook group, but we hope that's helped you today. Too many first home buyers are leaving money on the table and hurting their future selves because they don't know how to do things in the right order. That's what we do. We teach you the exact steps you need to take and support you along the way.
We help you move from a state of information overload to feeling excited and in control. You'll learn a clear step-by-step process that takes the guesswork out of buying your first home. You'll know exactly what to look for, who to talk to, and how to navigate every stage with confidence, avoiding costly rookie mistakes along the way.
We've created your first home buyer course, a 10-module self-paced course plus online mentoring. Now, the course only costs $990 and you get direct access to us every week. You can share the link of any property you're thinking of buying and we can help you work out whether it's an A, B or C grade or a no-go zone. We even help guide you through your negotiations.
Trust us, you will buy a hell of a lot better with our guidance and you'll overpay a lot more than the cost of the course if you don't know what you're doing.
Thanks for joining us. If you've enjoyed this podcast, we encourage you to join our Facebook group. It's called Your First Home Buyer Guide Australia and it's your opportunity to connect with us and ask us your questions, which we will answer, meaning you can make sure that you're not getting led down the garden path. We hope to see you there soon.